Hello and welcome to the Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Sometimes the stories begin in Washington, D.C. and come back to affect how we do things here at home in New Haven and Connecticut. I'm really pleased today that I'm going to have four folks who are in the midst of the Republican Party figuring out what its future will be in the aftermath of last Wednesday's violence and the ransacking of the U.S. Capitol when they were certifying the vote for the President of the United States. New Haven County has a group called the New Haven County Young Republicans, and it's the largest such group in the state, which means there are young people who care about the future of their party and the future of Connecticut, which is in and of itself an inspiring thing, given that we're always looking for young people to point us to the future. I was editing last week when all this was going on, and here was a press release from them saying, we don't think it was cool what just happened. That's not why we're in the game, but they're still in the game. So we have them on today. Say hello to Matt Schwartz, Pat Berlin, Cassie DeFala, and hopefully we'll soon have Rob Mullins joining us as well. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming on the air. And I see that some of you still have muted. You could unmute.
Morning.
Oh, and Rob Mullins is with us too. Yes. Now, Rob, you got your mask on and you in a place with other folks?
Yes, I'm in my school library right now.
Okay, which library is that?
Xavier High School.
Okay. Well, it's great to see you all. I'm going to start out with Matt. Matt, are you the chair of the group?
No, Patrick's the chair. I'm the political director of the New Haven County Young Republicans. Thanks for having us on today, by the way.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So, Matt, tell me, what did you think last week? What motivated you folks to issue a statement? What were your impressions when you watched this happening on TV?
Well, I think like most Americans, regardless of party, we were, pretty horrified with what was going on. I mean, we, like most Americans, we were following it, throughout the day, and, it surprised us. As young Republicans, we're fighting for a better Connecticut and, by default, a better country. So what took place at the Capitol doesn't represent our party nor what we stand for. So we felt really strongly that we needed to condemn violence, we needed to condemn violence at its root, lest it be considered acceptable by anyone, regardless of party.
Now, does anyone else want to jump in about where you were when you watched this happen, how you first saw it unfolding, and what was going through your mind? I know what was going through my mind was, whoa, I wasn't totally surprised that there was some problem, but that they got in. And then, especially since then, we're seeing the signs of people pummeling police officers. And what was I see Rob shaking his head. Rob, what was going through your mind where were you when you found out that this was going on?
It's actually pretty interesting. I was watching it live. I saw it happen because my mother was actually really interested in seeing the joint session of Congress as they were certifying the electors. She asked us to record it, and as it came on, we were watching the session.
Where were you,
initially?
Rob?
I was in my house.
So are you in school these days mostly, or home?
Well, our hybrid model just started this week, but most for the last 3 weeks I've been home.
What town do you live in?
North Branford.
And are you a senior?
Junior.
All right, you're already involved in politics. Way to go, man. So you're watching this, and what are you thinking while you're watching it? What are you seeing?
Well, what happened immediately preceding it was a Republican congressman had made a particularly incisive speech in favor of challenging the slate of electors from Alabama. And so the camera is facing the chamber head on, and you hear like kind of a this, I can't really describe the noise, but it sounded almost like banging on desks. And what it looked like to me was that the left side of the aisle was leaving. So I thought the Democrats were leaving in protest of what he had just said. Very shortly, though, it pans to the statue hall where there are people walking in. They have an American flag, a Trump flag, a Confederate flag. And then I was just, I couldn't even believe what I was seeing.
What went through your mind?
I was floored. At first I couldn't even believe that they had gotten past Capitol Police and their security. I was mostly just like waiting, what are they going to do? But I was, definitely floored that they even got there. And, that all the members of Congress seem so unprepared for it.
Did you have any thoughts when you saw the Confederate flag?
I thought that was disgusting. I think that's something that I particularly dislike, not only in this country, it's been seen in this state. Recently, there was just a controversy over the Durham Fair selling sweatshirts with the Confederate flag. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that anyone thinks that the Confederate flag symbolizes something in this country other than race, hatred, division, and racism.
Let me ask Cassie, where were you when you discovered what was going on, or what was going through your mind?
So I was actually not by my phone. I was working out and I checked my phone and my phone was blown up. There were so many messages. I had group texts from like the school of all my friends, and then our chat with like how we communicate with each other through the org. And there was just a lot going on. And I didn't know what was happening at first. So once I found out, I was obviously just as disgusted as everybody else. I mean, the first thing I felt was just anger, because I feel that we've worked so hard as young Republicans to make a better name for the party, because we know better than this and we know to do better. And it was just very upsetting and angering to see that so many people that, since they were holding Trump flags, we assumed identified with our party. And it was just disappointing because we worked so hard to come past this. And now it just feels like it's all flipped around again.
Where were you working out?
At home.
And was it like a stationary bicycle?
No, it's like these videos that I follow on YouTube. So it wasn't
So you had a video on YouTube on.
Yeah.
And you're working out, but then these messages pop up on the phone?
Yeah, so I had, because my TV has YouTube. So I went on YouTube and I'm doing the workout, and it was basically just like a dance workout. So I'm mid dance and I see my phone have like 100 notifications. So when I checked them, that's when I obviously paused the workout to figure out what was going on in the country, because obviously that was much more important. But it was just like caught me right in the middle, and I'm like mid in everything that I was doing. And it just had
Cassie, you said, are you still in school?
I am. I'm 100% remote right now. I go to Quinnipiac Law, and I just felt it was easier for me to be consistently from home and have everything right next to me. And those books are heavy. So
you're a law student?
Yes.
What year?
I am a 2L. I'm going into my second semester of 2L year.
On your second semester. So, I mean, law was a big topic of discussion. Did you feel that the election, like that the legal challenges to the election were legit? Did you feel that the judges made it clear that it was not a stolen election? Where did you see this from a legal point?
So from a legal point, we were studying a lot of aspects about the election, and I didn't get the chance to really look into all of the opinions fully that came out from these cases. But from what I understood from what my classes said, although they said there was evidence, I didn't see any evidence that came through that would be enough. And what really got me was that I wasn't really seeing any of the opinions coming out like accessible to a lot of people. Like there's a lot of opinions that are easy to find, but I feel like these were a little bit harder to find for me. Granted, I'm going to admit I had a lot of work in my semester, and I more so focused on what the school was telling me in my classes was important to study for that track rather than looking into it on my own.
Law school's no joke.
No,
especially first year.
Yeah, of course, I was in a law of politics class like at the same time this was all happening. So he had different aspects that he had already planned to have us go through. And unfortunately, the semester ended before we can really dive into that topic well.
Let me ask, we haven't heard from Pat. Pat, I'm sorry, did I remember correctly that you're the president of the Young Republicans of New Haven County?
Yeah, that's correct.
And where were you, Patrick, when this was going down?
I was in Washington. I still am. I was watching it unfold at first on the TV, and my roommates and I decided that we wanted to see it from afar, what was happening, the chaos. And, when we walked out, past Washington Circle, you could see fleets of cop cars, going down, towards the Capitol. And it was extremely disheartening to see, the hesitation and the, lack of response from the president and, House leadership for our party, at least to, end this, at the head. And, the more we see the failures of the Capitol Police to stop it, it was, extremely disheartening. And, a lot of Republicans have had, difficulty, seeing like, how do we stay with the party in this? But I think it's important that, at these inflection points, leaders that are coming up in our party, like, those on our board, we take a stand and we try and make sure that we correct the party and move it in a more positive direction.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I've been a reporter a long time, and parties take turns. Every party is a coalition. It has groups that contest for power and have different views. And that's a good thing. It's healthy. But then you have your points where longstanding divisions come to the fore. Patrick, what are you doing in DC?
I'm a student at the George Washington University. So even though I'm, from Connecticut, I'm still here to do studies and,
What year are you in?
I'm a junior right now.
What are you studying?
I'm studying political science and history.
All right. What are you hoping to be going into?
I'm potentially looking at law school, potentially looking at working at some of the, firms in town that do, partnerships with members of Congress. I'm still figuring things out.
That's good.
Recent events have been pretty distracting. So,
and where are you from in Connecticut?
I'm from Woodbridge originally.
Okay, so here you are. You're in your apartment with your roommates when this was going on. Were you watching it on TV?
Yeah, we had the TV going, and we were seeing the. At first, that they were assembled outside the the barriers. But then, slowly but surely, we saw the situation unfold where people were rushing the Capitol. As Rob was describing earlier, you saw people going through the velvet ropes in the Statuary Hall, and beginning to get to the heart of the Capitol and to get into the inner reachings. And it was extremely shocking to see them get so far. And so when we went outside, you could see the chaos unfolding in the streets. You saw, tens of police cars going en route, from different avenues, all converging on the Capitol. And they started to block off, the, couple blocks in front of the White House and the Capitol building as you got closer. So we had to.
How far do you live from all that?
So I live on 25th Street. So I'm about. I can see the Lincoln Memorial if I go out 2 blocks, and then you can see the Capitol if you go another 5 blocks towards Pennsylvania Avenue. So
how far now? At what point did you walk out? Was this around 2:30 after they breached? You said, "Holy cow, we're gonna go look at this."
Yeah, when we heard all the sirens, we were like, "All right, well, we won't go too far. We won't go too close. We'll stay just enough away." But yeah, it was around the time that they had already started to like breach the inner barriers.
Where did you get?
We stopped well short of the White House. I think we got. I think we were like 2 blocks away when the police started to put up the barricades. We had to go around to see if we could like get a better view of the Capitol. But
what did you see?
You just saw a lot of people fleeing. First off, you saw a lot of people leaving the Capitol building. Some of the protesters, I think, saw what was going on and said that's not for them. Even those who had come to the protest at first, I think some of them were shocked as well. And it was good to see at least some people weren't taking part in the insurrection.
Patrick, why didn't you go to the protest itself?
Honestly, I think there's I didn't necessarily believe that it would be safe, and B, I thought that the process has worked its will. The American people voted. The electors cast their ballots at the 50 state capitals. I didn't think that there was any need to go down and see it in person at that point. I think that the president had his chances to file challenges to the elections in various states, but I didn't think we really needed to challenge all these electoral slates. I think the senators and representatives were more than in their right to do so and voice their objections, but at the end of the day, I didn't believe that this was the right juncture to sustain any sort of challenge.
And in this day, you're listening to Dateline New Haven on WNHH FM, your home for community radio at 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. This is quite interesting for me. I'm really enjoying chatting with the New Haven County Young Republican leadership who are trying to figure out what happened last week, the way we all are, and what happens next to their party and their involvement. Let me ask, and tell me who would like to answer this one. Maybe we'll start with Cassie, whoever wants to speak on this one. What about this week? There's discussion of impeachment. There are calls on Mike Pence, who there is now a meme, hang Mike Pence. There's efforts to actually kill him. There's calls on him to invoke the 25th Amendment. The House of Representatives, relying largely on the 14th Amendment, is seeking impeachment. Some Democrats, as well as leading Republicans, think impeachment's a distraction to both the Biden agenda, and President Trump today speaking said he thinks that's where all the anger is, about the impeachment, not about his actions. And other people say censure the president. And other people say come to every state capitol this weekend with your guns and start protesting and block it next week. So I just gave you all the options. What options do folks here want to do either personally or like to see their party do in the next week?
I think
Cassie, why don't you start?
Yeah, I don't mind starting. So there was a lot to unpack there. I think that number one, we need to stop having all of these, because they're turning into riots. So I don't think that a call to come to the Capitol with your guns is a good idea at all. I think that that should be condemned, because I think that you're just going to have more situations like we had at the Capitol. So I think that anybody encouraging anything like that should be stopped. And any politicians that hear that happening should be condemning it, because it's just going to lead to more violence and more results of what we had the other day. And I don't think that that should become a habit that we see in this country. I mean, I think we've heard several of us say it, like the process has played out, and whether or not you agreed with it, you need to respect it at a certain point. And I don't think that a call for all of these riots and death threats is definitely never the way either. I mean, I can't believe that people are even acting like this in this way, but I kind of can in a way. It's been a very hostile environment in this country for the last 4 years. And I also just think it's surprising that people think it's so surprising that Biden would have won. So I think that what needs to happen is, if there's going to be charges against Trump, it should be for what has been done. If there's a charge for that, again, I don't want to act like I'm the expert on that sense, but I could see how impeachment could be a distraction, because Biden's going to be inaugurated on the 20th and it's now the 12th. So
people are concerned that the president's not going to go. Harry Drost, who's a big Trump fan, he's our station manager here, he's on the show. He thinks Trump's just going to go. There's some people say he's showing that he isn't just going to go. They're worried about a military showdown next week. Not that any of us knows, but I mean, what do you guys think? What do you think, Pat or Matt? What do you think, or Rob?
I'll jump in if that's all right, Pat. So
Yeah.
the president said a lot of things, but he's already committed to a peaceful transfer of power. That's his own words. So I guess in principle, I think he's going to go away. In terms of fears of the military or, something else happening, I think the events of last week, although tragic, should kind of solidify our confidence that the military isn't going to all of a sudden side with the president,
Mm-hmm.
in some kind of hypothetical hostile takeover. I mean, the military was asked straight up by Speaker Nancy Pelosi if they, had any communications with the president on, on going to, on being a part of this. And they said they wouldn't. They said they wouldn't go either way. The military doesn't want to play a role in this. I think Trump's going to make a lot of.
Can I ask what you do for a living? Are you a student or?
Yeah, so so right now I'm a lobbyist here in Connecticut. I dabble in local politics, like I think we're gonna get to a little later. And I'm also an aspiring law student. I'm hoping to go to law school.
Let's get to it now. Where you live?
I live in Woodbridge, actually. Common theme here.
And whom do you lobby for?
I lobby for Capital Strategies LLC in Hartford.
Is that whose outfit is that?
PJ's.
Okay. And so you do state issues. You're really familiar with state issues.
Yes, sir.
And what got you involved in politics, Matt? How did you get involved with the Republican Party?
I've been a Republican, for all my life, and that's going to be, because of my parents. But getting involved in politics, one man, Chuck Pine, my mentor and honestly my political idol is the reason I'm here. I was a senior in, go ahead.
I'm not familiar with Chuck. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. But Chuck Pine is is Mr. Politics here in Woodbridge. So
Oh,
I
okay.
can kind of attest. And I was a senior in college, with no real idea of what I wanted to do, for my future. I knew I liked politics. I was a political science major along with history. And I get a call from Chuck Pine asking me to sign some kind of petition or something, join some kind of meeting. I missed the meeting. But I said I'd love to get involved going forward. He gave me a job on Senator George Logan's campaign, and I worked my way up, became deputy campaign manager. And, since then, politics, I'm telling you, politics it's an addiction. Once you get started, it's hard to quit.
I tell you, I saw George Logan. He's been on the show a whole bunch of times. That guy is everywhere. Were you there was this 2 years ago, the famous election when they miscounted in Ansonia?
Yeah, that was crazy. We went to during the course of that night, we won, we lost, we won again. I went to bed thinking that George and Bob Stefanowski had won. I woke up the next morning, Bob had lost and was conceding, and George was in doubt. So my blood pressure is
So
glad
you
that's
worked
over.
on your first campaign was the 2018 George Logan campaign.
Yes.
Now, how do you view the different factions within the party? Like, what issues motivate you right now? I'm older than you folks. I was born in 1960. And when I started covering Connecticut politics, Republicans were for environmental protection, no deficits, free trade, open borders, pretty much on immigration. Now the party, the ascendant wing and the agenda that was at the last Republican National Convention, very much against free trade, closed borders, doesn't say climate change isn't real and that you got to loosen regulation. And I realize that I'm presenting that in a very biased way, and I'm sorry about that. And deficit went to record levels. So that's the critique, I guess, people are making. Is that a fair critique, or where do you stand on those kind of issues, Matt?
So I do think that's a relatively fair critique, and I think you said it best, much earlier on, on this when you say the parties, kind of flip platforms, kind of, change guards every now and then. So right now, I think the National Party is very, I don't want to say anti-environment, but I don't think the environment's a top priority for them. I think in Connecticut, especially younger Republicans like us, we want to put a little more emphasis on preserving the environment.
Mm-hmm.
We're the next generation of Republicans and obviously the next generation of, voters. We love this earth and we want it to be here, long after we're gone.
Well, what makes you Republican and what issues, what values?
I think a lot of me personally would be honestly economic. I believe in responsible spending, possibly putting, helping our businesses out, which are being hamstrung in Connecticut, putting a little less emphasis on, social welfare and more emphasis on, those that are going to contribute to society. That's something I genuinely care about.
Let me ask Cassie on that. Cassie, how did you get involved and what are the key issues that motivate you? What do you want to see the party stand for?
So I got into politics a little bit differently. My family is actually very not political growing up. I'm pretty sure both of my parents were just registered independents and they kind of voted based off of how they felt on the candidate. And they never really talked about politics growing up. But I graduated.
Where was this, Cassie? Where were you growing up?
Naugatuck. I was born in Derby, but I've been in Naugatuck most of my life. But I graduated in 2015 from high school. So when I went into college, that was when they were kind of doing all the primaries and the debates, and where the 2016 election was kind of getting started. So because I was going into college while that was happening, I felt that it was a very political environment at the time. And because I lived in Connecticut, I was paying attention to a lot of the local issues more so rather than the national aspect of it. And in Connecticut, I just felt it was really important for Republicans to come out and try to make a difference, just because the state really gets hammered in terms of taxes and a lot of spending, and just is so expensive to live here. I mean, even back in the beginning of this year, not that long ago, there was a whole new gas tax and everything. Gas went up again. So that's kind of how I got involved in the Republican Party, because I felt it was important on a state level, because this state was in trouble when I first got into politics. And that was probably around the time Matt got into, because that was when Connecticut was going to pick their next governor. So I got involved with an organization UNH had started, College Republicans, and they were helping a lot of local elections. And I remember the one that I helped was the 2017 election for Richard Zekin, the mayor of Derby. That's kind of how I really got involved. And from there, I actually met Dave Papson, who also helped start this group, but he's studying for his nursing exam, so he couldn't make it with us today.
So fair to say taxes and spending are kind of central issues for you in business?
Yeah. And I think that making the party all around more, I don't know the word to put on it, but I just think a lot of what you said, like a lot of the Republicans are just out of touch with what needs to be happening now.
There's genuine disagreements about taxes and spending, which really do fairly represent a Republican Democratic difference. What about masks? Do you folks all feel, I saw that, let me ask Rob, I saw you were wearing a mask. Do you folks agree with a good chunk of the Republican Party who feels that the pandemic's been exaggerated and that people shouldn't be wearing masks and that it's an infringement? But that would be, I think, an exaggeration to say that all Republicans feel that way. I'm wondering, and I'm worried I have a little bias when I ask that question. Patrick, do you have thoughts on that, or anybody else about masks and how that became a partisan issue?
Yeah, I think a lot of the concerns over masks stem from people that are a little bit in general they're more of the small government type and they see it as infringement. But I think that in times when your actions directly affect each other's health, right? It's no longer a question of federal government's overreach. It's a question of whether or not you're going to respect your fellow citizen. I think one of the problems that we've seen in a lot of places is that the reliance has been on punitive measures to enforce masks, when I think the best way to pitch it is as a courtesy. And I think Connecticut was one of the states that didn't initially enforce mask fines, and we saw one of the highest rates of mask compliance across the country, and that's why we've done so well compared to other states, as a large percentage of the pandemic over time.
So I'm very much pro masks, and I will never tell another person to put on a mask. I just kind of feel like that's not a productive argument. If they're feeling hardcore about it, they're not going to put it on. Is anybody here more skeptical of masks than Patrick, Cassie, or Matt? Do you feel that we shouldn't wear masks in public?
Well, I'm not going to say for a second that something should or shouldn't be done. I think the question more is of should the government be mandating or regulating someone wearing a mask? I mean, I think it's a lot tougher. I guess I'm just trying to sympathize with both sides of the argument. I think it's a lot tougher to tell, for an example, college kids in the most social time of their lives. For an example, Quinnipiac, we have Quinnipiac here in Hamden, we have Southern, et cetera. They're in some of the most social times of their lives. And I think it's very tough to tell them, you can't have a normal college experience. You have to, work, you have to do school from home. You have to pay to live on campus, but you can't go to, any social events. You can't, you have to wear a mask everywhere you go. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, realistically, the virus poses a lesser threat to younger people. There's no question that it does. I'm not going to say here for a fraction of a second that we shouldn't be trying to help our fellow man. We shouldn't be wearing, masks to help out. But I understand why some people are taking this a little less seriously, are a little more bullish on this, if I'm being honest.
People feel like you're right. The rates are lower for younger people. That could hurt them. The concern that's raised from a public policy view is that's what spreads the virus. Young people get it. They don't know they had it. They're in touch with their older people and they spread it in the community. It's a tough one because the facts keep changing on how the virus spreads and, but how about, so let me ask you, Pat, where you said you plan to go next is into law and maybe politically connected law. Where would you like to see the party go on these issues like immigration, trade, environment, deficit? Do you agree with the sort of Trump wings positions on that? Do you agree with what they used to call the whacker-lackers, the Connecticut Republicans who were actually fiscally conservative, but environmentally and socially liberal? The parts, the Democrats are more conservative on some of that stuff.
Well, so growing up as a Republican in Connecticut, I was very shocked to see actually how, relatively conservative Connecticut Republicans are. And I think that's part of a larger realignment across the country. I think that our party should go in a direction that recognizes that immigration is not something that's inherently good or bad. It's a complex public policy tool, and it's really a question of resources. And we have the resources to make immigration work, and I think immigration is necessary. What I don't think we should be doing is engaging in the promotion of policies that enact regressive costs on working families. So if you have big corporations, paying people under the table, that suppresses wages, and that ultimately makes it harder for working families who have immigrated properly or who have lived there their whole lives to get a decent wage. So I think that we should be investing in making sure people can come here legally, and making sure that we can monitor those who cross illegally, because and make sure that we go after corporations that hire people en masse illegally, because that's what's really affecting people across the country. We've seen stagnant wages for decades because of these practices.
Do you kind of agree with the crackdowns and the child separation policies of ICE and the president?
So with respect to that, I mean, that was a strategy that they wanted to use as deterrent, and I think using children as a way to threaten new immigrants, I just don't think is productive at all. And I think it demonstrates a moral failing for our country. Who are we to then lord over other countries and tell them what they're doing is inhumane? So I think I believe that sort of child separation policy was not the right thing to do. I think it was a failure of public policy to work to fix a problem, and I think it created more than not. It ended up making it difficult for the federal government to even find the original parents after the fact. So I think in every instance, it hasn't stopped immigration illegally. It hasn't stopped any new people from coming. So it was a complete failure. I think there's definitely other avenues to pursue.
And let me ask you if I'm putting words, and let me remind people we're listening to Dateline New Haven at WNHH-FM, your home for community radio at 103.5 FM, live streamed at New Haven Independent. We're getting to meet the New Haven County Young Republicans, and what a pleasure it is. And it's fraught times right now in our country and a transition, and they're looking to the future, help us point the way. Tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth. And listening to you folks, what I think I'm hearing is that you are Republicans and that you have strong feelings about fiscal conservatism, lower taxes, maybe less business regulation. Maybe I'm hearing a little bit more middle of the road between the two extremes of the parties on issues like immigration and climate change. Is that a fair way to characterize where you're coming from? And don't, I'm not looking for you to say yes. I want to really know where you're coming from and understand. Like Cassie, would that describe Cassie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a pretty fair, accurate, representation of where I stand. Again, a lot of the reasons that I joined this party was because I saw the issues Connecticut was facing. So I think on more of a federal level, it's important to stop seeing extremes on both sides and more of the middle road so that we can get more done.
So where do you folks stand on Trump? Good president, bad president? You hope he runs again? Hope it doesn't influence the party? Hope he does determine what kind of people in primaries? Where do you folks stand on Donald Trump? Why don't we start with Matt on that?
All right. Well, the first thing I can probably say is that I didn't vote for the president in 2016, and I was pretty public about that because I didn't believe he earned my vote. And I think that,
did you vote for Evan, or who did you vote for?
I don't mind telling you, I voted third party actually. Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson.
Yeah, Gary Johnson.
I thought he was a good campaign. I thought people were too hard on him for making an occasional foreign policy slip up. The guy was obviously a governor, knew what he was doing, and anyone could get a gotcha.
Anyone that can climb Mount Everest is okay with me. I'll say that.
So you're not Trumpy.
I don't consider myself a Trump Republican. I guess the question of, was he a good president? I think things like I think this last year is going to hurt his legacy a lot. I think contesting the election, I certainly think the violence at the Capitol, the whole Twitter rants, those are going to count against him. I don't mind saying that I think there were some positive economic changes that he established. Stock markets reached all-time highs under his leadership. Certainly we've been, you could argue that we're in a better position in the Middle East than we were before the Trump presidency. So I think there were some positive things to his presidency in terms of was he a good president? I think his legacy is going to be forever tarnished by what we've seen this year.
You know, it's interesting. It became impossible, and it's his fault as much as anybody because he makes everything about Trump to really talk about issues. There's so many issues that I'm just talking as an old guy now that after a while, they're really not Democrat versus Republican or liberal conservative. There's certainly ones that are. But like you look at like how do you deal with North Korea? How do you deal with China's threat to economics? How do you deal with the pandemic? What do you do about social media companies? I can honestly tell you that those are not liberal, conservative, Republican, Democratic issues. You see people on both sides who end up agreeing with this. Tim Bannon and the head of American Prospect agreed on China. My favorite issue is Section 230, the social media companies, because I run a news website. So it's always bugged me the way that all these social media companies have no responsibility for what they publish. So if they just publish everyone's comment, they can't be sued if they print libel or incitement to violence. So my favorite irony is that I agree, just personally, 1,000% with Donald Trump that should be repealed. And social media companies should not have a special exemption from laws about what they publish. But I think the irony of that is that they could never, ever again publish anything Donald Trump says, because then they could be sued for libel, or they could be sued for defamation. That's what I just love about the Trump stuff. There are all these great debates in America right now about how we're going to rethink issues. He came in talking about infrastructure, resetting certain foreign relationships. And it was kind of hard to have those conversations when everything became about Trump. But I've talked too much there. Cassie and Patrick, how do you guys feel about Donald Trump?
So I kind of agree with Matt. You can argue that there were good aspects to his presidency, especially economic wise. But at the end of the day, I feel like all anybody is going to remember is the breach at the Capitol. I mean, I think that especially in this last year, you had the pandemic, and then a lot of things that I don't want to say people forgot about, but because there's been so much overshadowing, when RBG did pass, I think that the decision he made to appoint somebody when everybody was calling for him not to is also going to be something that tarnished his reputation. So I think
so interesting. So I'm a liberal, and I think he had every right to do that. I mean, his motivation was he thought she was going to steal the election for him. But Democrats would have done that. I mean, he made a great argument, but he said, I'm elected. I'm allowed to do this. You know, I agree there was hypocrisy of people who said in the past we wouldn't let Obama do it. I thought that was horrible, but yeah.
I think that it was a mess to begin with. I think that the issue stems back from even when Obama tried to nominate Merrick Garland and it was blocked. I mean, I think that there should be a lot more talk about the Supreme Court processes, because I think that there's a lot of issues there that we don't even have nearly.
That's right. You're a law student, so you're dealing with that. So is Patrick. What do you think about the Federalist Society suggestion? They've been so interesting in all these debates this year. They suggest 12-year terms staggered for the justices so that there's not an incentive that, you know, everything is thrown down for life.
I don't agree with that. I think that the current arrangement is probably the best. I think what changed was the politicization and the empowering of the third branch over the other two. There's a reason why the judicial branch is the last articulated in the constitutions, because it's not supposed to be that big a deal. We've increasingly allowed Congress and the presidency to cede important issues to be adjudicated to the courts, which I just think is a complete
and that's a bipartisan critique, Patrick. I mean, I certainly agree with that Congress, they guess because of the way politics works now, and maybe social media with the instant reactions of mobs before you could talk about an issue, they're really not compromising the way they did when they passed this bill for stimulus. In general, they don't do that. So they do kind of leave it for the courts to decide, you know. Harry Drow says term limits in Congress would help. I don't know. So you want to change that. So where do you stand on Trump, Patrick?
I wasn't really into President Trump when he first ran or when he first won. Over the course of the 2018 to 2019, chaos, I began to, strongly consider supporting him in the next election. But I think the way that he's handled the 2020 election, the COVID-19, virus, that gave a lot of people second thoughts. And
but did you end up, did you support him?
I didn't end up voting for him. I ended up just doing a blank write-in vote because I didn't think that Joe Biden or Donald Trump had earned my vote, frankly. And I think that Even though there's a lot of things that I think he's done that people disagree with in the party and as a country as a whole, I think that he has done a lot to push the Republican Party in some ways to the right direction. He's made it so that Republicans can criticize excesses of unfettered capitalism that preys on working families. He's allowed us to sort of renegotiate, trade deals so that they empower the American worker. One of the problems with TPP was a great trade deal in the way that it would combat China's influence in Southeast Asia. But one of the downsides was that it was going to sacrifice a lot of American jobs and ship them to places like Australia and New Zealand. And I think that his sort of strong stance in that, maybe it's not 100% accurate in his articulation of the facts all the time, but he has shifted that. He shifted the Overton window on interventionism. He was able to correct some mistakes that Secretary John Kerry, a more seasoned diplomat, had. Who said, we can't negotiate normalized relations between Israel and other Middle Eastern countries unless Palestine signed off on them. But yet the president was able to do that. And withdrawing troops from the Middle East slowly, I think is a good thing. We have a economy dominated in large part by a war machine in some instances that President Eisenhower warned us about. So I think he's done a lot good for the party.
I think it's fair to say that this last election does not mean America disagrees with Donald Trump or agrees with Democrats or vice versa. I mean, I think what I really saw in that election is we're divided on a lot of issues, and that others is just more complicated, and that we're going to be talking. If it weren't all about Donald Trump, we might have seen a different result. So tell me, on state level, national level, before I let you folks go, whom do you want to see run for governor, and what kind of person do you want to see as the president? Oh, first of all, Cassie and Madison, nobody voted for Trump this time?
No.
That's accurate. Okay.
We are a Big Tent organization. We have people who did support the president, and we welcome Republicans of all stripes.
And Cassie, what's your title with the group?
I think it's still a working title. Dave, someone who else is not here right now, did contact me, and I kind of helped everybody get things going paperwork wise. But I think we're still trying to lay out the.
But are you on the board?
I believe.
Yeah, Cassie's.
Oh,
good. But
I'm sorry. Doesn't matter.
I'm sorry, Phil. I was going to say,
one-on-one. Whom do you want to see? What kind of person do you want to see run for governor in Connecticut this coming up for the Republicans, and whom do you want to see run for president in the future?
So president-wise, I feel that we need to work harder to find somebody that represents the party more as a whole rather than one side. I don't have a name for a person, but I think ideally it would be somebody more towards the middle ground, because I think that if the Republicans want a chance, and this kind of goes for Connecticut too, you need somebody more towards the middle if Republicans want to win right now, because I think that Trump left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth for Republicans in general. Whether or not that's fair, I think that it's true. And I think that if you are a Republican who wants to have any office in this country right now, you need to come out not necessarily against Trump, but you can't be a Trump Republican.
You can't be. And what about the idea of forming a new party like the Lincoln Party, where you'd say, we'll openly say we don't want whether it's 5 or 10% of the country that was out there in militias supporting the kind of more controversial parts of Trump, but is a conservative party that would go everywhere from, Larry Hogan to Nikki Haley and Tim Scott. Would you be open to a new party, breakaway party, or do you want to change the Republican Party from within?
So I personally have always been a fan of smaller parties being able to gain more headway in politics. But I think that the way our system is set up, I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. I hope that in my lifetime sometime I could see more than just a two-party system. But unfortunately, with the way that it's set up, I think that the focus should be fixing the party from within, just because, especially on a national level, you're not going to see anybody besides the two main parties, at least in name, coming forward.
How about you, Matt? Whom do you want to see governor or president? What do you think about a third party, Lincoln Party?
Well, I guess I'll start with the first part of the question. So it seems like as of right now, we have 3 solid candidates for on the Republican side that want to make a run at governor. Aaron Stewart in New Britain, Bob Stefanowski looks like he wants to run again, and then Demis Claridis more in our neck of the woods. I'm going to be a little biased, and because of how long I've known Themis and, worked on several of her campaigns, I think she'd be a great governor. And I think she could also appeal to both the, you know, farther right Republicans in Connecticut, but also the middle ground Democrats, which make up quite a bit of our state's population. Someone like Erin Stewart would be interesting to look at. Interesting to look at because she's so moderate. The problem is I don't think she'd make it through a primary. For the simple reason that I don't think Republicans would vote someone, as far, well, I'll say as far to the left wing of the Republican Party as she.
She wins the Latino vote and the labor vote sometimes in Britain. It's pretty amazing. What about Stefanowski? What's your read on him?
So I think there's a very strong narrative that it wasn't that Bob's strategy was flawed last time, not Bob as a candidate. So I think there's a very strong belief in Republican circles that with a better team behind him and maybe with a stronger message, maybe instead of going in as the underdog, because don't forget, everyone expected Mark Boughton to become the Republican nominee.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone who would disagree with that. So I think coming in as the dark horse, maybe this time, instead of coming in as the dark horse, coming in as the favorite or coming in as a very strong contender from the beginning would give him the momentum right out of the gate.
He has a very moderate presentation, but he turns out to be with pretty right wing of the party. He's the only one publicly, I guess, in that batch who won't say that Biden won the election. And he came out really swinging at Hartford last week. I know that, Len Suzy and others are advising, but when you talk to Bob Stefanowski, he's a very moderate seeming reasonable guy. I can't tell if he's playing for the right or not, if he's trying to be the Trump candidate and Clarity's and Stewart would try to be sort of the center candidate.
Well, as we've seen from our unfortunate losses this last election cycle, in Connecticut, at least, being associated with the Trump name isn't exactly a good thing.
Yeah. How about you, Patrick? Where do you see president, governor, and what do you think about a third party?
I think we're 4 years out for president, so I'd like to see who steps forward. In terms of governor, I think Matt and Casey talked about some excellent candidates. Bob, has definitely learned a lot from his last time. And his wife, Amy Stefanowski, she's gotten very involved with the party, which is always good to see. I think staying involved was definitely the right move for him. And he's sort of demonstrated a commitment to Connecticut, which I think is a positive step. Themis Clarities is a very well-seasoned legislator. She's led House Republicans to, historic highs in their numbers. And, I think that she's proven to be a very good leader. She helped negotiate that bipartisan budget in 2018. I think Erin Stewart's demonstrated that she can talk to, people of all backgrounds. So I think, whatever the message coming out of this election, as we go into the 2022 primaries, it's that we have a strong bench of candidates who can unite this party, all regions from, the eastern corners and the Fairfield County to the Naugatuck Valley. I think we've got a great bench of candidates, and I hope that this time around we focus on, the strengths of our party rather than fighting amongst each other.
All right. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, folks, and I have to say that I feel much better about the future of Connecticut after seeing people like you being involved, caring, thinking seriously about issues. And I wish you all the best in both building up your organization and having a great impact on our state in the decades to come. We've been talking here with New Haven County Republicans, Matt Schwartz, Pat Berlin, and Cassie DeFala. I hope I said your names right. Rob Mullins joined us at the beginning, and then he had to go to class. Way to go, Rob. We do want you to go to class. And as usual, Harry Droz is our station manager who keeps us going on all platforms. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us day and night here at WNHH FM, New Haven's home for community radio.